are going to, we had a nice 8 or 9 months studying Mishnah Brachot. We finished Mishnah Brachot, which was quite impressive. And now we did a little bit of Purim to hold us over to Pesach. And now, believe it or not, we are in the season of Pesach, just coming in 3 weeks-ish, something like that, which is pretty hard to believe. And the Mishnah has a lot to say about Passover. There are 10 chapters of Mishnah on Passover, and just to remind you, there were 9 chapters of Mishnah Brachot, right? Or 8 chapters. Anyway, there are 10 chapters of Pesach, and we have 3 weeks. So I will tell you right off the bat that we are not going to be covering the entire of the Mishnah for Pesach, but I have chosen selections that I think are, interesting and relevant to the way that we do Pesach today. So today we're going to be talking about what happens sort of pre-Passover in order to prepare, and then next week some more probably on different types of foods and things that we can and cannot eat during Passover. And then the very last class, which is the Monday right before Pesach, we're going to focus on chapter 10. And chapter 10 is all about the Haggadah and the different changes that you'll see from the Mishnah. A lot of our Haggadah is taken from almost exactly from the Mishnah. And so we're going to look at chapter 10 and see sort of the changes that we see today in our Haggadah. I want to just say one thing up front, which we know because we've studied, because we've been studying the Mishnah for so long, that we know that the Mishnah can inform halacha, but is not actually a halachic document. And because of that, you won't see anything in the Mishnah about how to kosher things necessarily, right? There's a lot of intricacies around how you kosher a kitchen, for example, for Passover. You pour boiling water over this, and you dip this, and you throw this away, and you put this away. None of that is in the Mishnah. More so thinking about the chametz itself and what actually makes it chametz, which makes it forbidden on Passover, and how to sort of search for it and prepare your home. So that's where we're going to start today. And before we actually get into the Mishnah, I think it's important to look at the Torah because, of course, that's where it comes from, right? The holiday of Pesach. And so I'm going to share my screen and let's look a little bit at these Torah verses. Now, these Torah verses are specifically to inform chapter 1 of the Mishnah. So there's other Torah verses in here there's other Torah verses. Sorry, let me back up. These are the 2 main sections, Exodus 12 and Exodus 13. Sorry, I should have labeled it. 13 starts down here. And the highlighted pieces are the pieces that are going to inform our study this morning. I'm just getting us to a place where I can see everybody. And here we go. So we're not going to read the whole thing, but basically here's what we have here. This shall be to you one of remembrance. You shall celebrate it as a festival to God throughout the ages. You shall celebrate it as an institution for all time. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day, you shall remove leaven from your houses. So this is number 1, okay? This is one of the 4 things forbidden on Pesach, right? You should, it should not be in your house, right? You should remove it, actually. You shouldn't be anywhere that you can see it. That's number 1. And for whoever eats leavened bread, whoever eats, being the key word, eats leavened bread, that person shall be cut off from Israel. This was something called karet, where they were sort of spiritually excommunicated, whatever that means, and they were cut, so punishable by that, which is quite extreme, right? And so there's number 1 and number 2. You shall not essentially benefit from it. It shouldn't be in your home, and you should not eat it. And then here we go again. It's to reiterate, no leaven shall be found in your houses. It cannot be seen for 7 days. And the last one, no leavened bread shall be found with you. No leavened bread shall be found in your territory. So here's the sort of summing up what we just read. Leaven cannot be eaten during the 7 days of Pesach. And we know in the diaspora that we add a day, but that's not to concern us so much, just talking about what we are and are not allowed to do. We're not allowed to benefit from it, which is kind of an interesting thing, benefiting from leavening. Maybe you find it in your cosmetics or something like that. We can sort of take it to modern times, but what does benefiting actually mean? Leaven should not be seen, right? You shouldn't be able to see it anywhere in your home, and leaven should not be found. So if you went searching for it, you also wouldn't be able to necessarily find it. Now those two usually go together, seen and found in the text, and they're kind of interesting if you think about it today, because we do this whole thing where we search, but we also, many people put it away as opposed to necessarily taking it completely out of their home, right? So some people will, mark a shelf in their cabinet and put all the leavening there and then sort of tape over it and kind of, what do you call it? Like out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. We also sell the chametz, which we'll talk about. But here there was clearly more of a stricter take, I should say, which is that they actually wanted it completely out of your home. There wasn't this idea of like storing it somewhere and coming back to it. It was like they wanted it completely out, and that tradition of being able to stick it somewhere and not see it is something that came about sort of in a more modern, later on. That being said, I'm going to take it even more modern, which is that today there are all sorts of tshuvot, all sorts of responsa about how to deal with Pesach and the pandemic. And if you're interested in that, you can let me know. There's many, many papers on it. And those came about last year, right, when we were sort of new in the pandemic and food was actually potentially scarce. We weren't sure, right? If you remember way back a year ago, when we were celebrating Pesach for the first time, it was like, are we going to be able to get into the grocery store without having to stand in a line for 3 hours? Are we going to be able to get the foods that we need via Instacart, et cetera, et cetera? And so there is a great deal that the conservative movement says about wasting, actually, which I think is quite relevant and also very important. So these are from the Torah verses, right? From the Torah verses, we get these 4 prohibitions. And now we're going to look at something called Bidikat Hametz, which is the removal. Bodkin means to search for or to look for, right? And to actually go and look for the chametz. So the intention here, or the thing that the Mishnah thinks you already know, is that you've already cleaned your house, right? So you're kind of at the very last step. You've put things away. You've maybe sold them. You've thrown away things from last year that you don't think you're going to eat, after Pesach, things like that. And now we're kind of at the very last step for this tradition called Bidikat Hametz. So here we go. On the evening of the 14th, I'll read in Hebrew first. Or le'arba'a asar bodkin et hachametz le'or ner. On the evening, they use the word or, which is kind of strange, on the light of, right? On the evening of the 14th of the month of Nisan, one searches for leavened bread in his home by a candlelight. So maybe you've heard of this tradition before. You actually literally take a candle, some sort of a light, and you go and you search around your home for the leftover chametz. Kol makom she'ein machnisin bo chametz ein sarich bidika. Any place into which one does not typically take leavened bread does not require a search, as it is unlikely that there's any unleavened bread there. This is probably the most unknown clause in our tradition, right? That any place that you don't usually take leavened bread, you shouldn't worry about it. Where might that be? The bathroom, right? So you don't have to necessarily worry about the bathroom. Maybe you have a rule in your house that you don't eat in your bedroom. And if you have a rule in your house that you don't eat in your bedroom, then you don't have to check your bedroom, for leavened breads. Now, I'll tell you, in my house, we have rules that we don't eat in certain places, and those rules don't matter because my kid will walk in and crumbs will fall off of her, and I know that they're in every single room, right? So I have to think about that, but maybe you don't. And that's something to consider, right? You don't have to drive yourself crazy to check every single room if you know, okay, I don't bring bread leavening or whatever into this room. Do people have rooms like that in their house? Do they feel like, okay, that makes sense? Yeah. Good. Bathroom, anywhere else? Catherine.
Bedroom.
Yeah.
I'm just going to share something that's on topic, but slightly off topic. About 10 years ago, when my kids were younger, I wrote a children's story all about Bidikat Hametz, and I used to tell it at the toddler Shabbat thing. Anyways, it was all about this crazy family that when they did Bidikat Hametz, they found Hametz in all the weird places,
Right.
like bagels in their bathtub. And so I actually, and it's a good story. It's people like it. Anyways, but I submitted it to this Orthodox publisher and they were just like, like they couldn't deal with the idea that you might have food in your bathroom.
Right.
They needed substantial edits.
Right. That's funny. That's great. Yeah. So but that's a perfect example, right? Like we don't typically bring food into the bathroom. I would say that most people don't bring food into the bedroom, though. I guess when you have little kids, you have to worry about crumbs and things like that. But I actually like this line a lot. Because I think the Mishnah is giving us permission to like calm down a little bit, right? We don't have to go crazy. We don't have to search every space or every corner. Just the ones that we think are probable, are probable for holding the chametz. And then this last line, V'lama amru shtei shurot b'martef makom shemachnisim bo chametz. And with regard to what the sages of previous generations meant when they said one must search of 2 rows. So now we're going to bring back our favorites, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, for a brief moment of machlochet. So what are they saying when they say that you have to check the 2 rows? What they're saying is probably something like a cellar or a like outdoor or downstairs pantry of some kind. They translated here as cellar, i.e. a place into which one typically takes leavened bread. The early Tanaim are in dispute. Beit Shammai says that this is referring to searching for the first 2 rows across the entire cellar. So I actually, if you Google, not that you would try this, if you Google the Hebrew line, shtei shurot, where was it? Shtei shurot al pnei kol hamartef, somebody out there in the world illustrated it for us, which I thought was great. So you have these 2 images. So up at the top, this is Beit Shammai's argument here. So Beit Shammai says you either have to do this full row here or this full row here. So if you were walking down the aisle, you would sort of get full coverage, right, of anywhere that may have touched or may have some chametz there, or the outer 2 rows. It's kind of unclear and also depends on the organization of your cellar, of your pantry. And Beit Hillel says there is no need to search that extensively, not to worry, as it's sufficient to search the 2 external rows with all the upper ones, and this dispute will be explained in the illustrated Gemara. So here we go. So this is Beit Shammai here at the top, the sort of more full, strict view where you really have to get the whole outside. And then this is what somebody thought was the Beit Hillel view, less strict, but still checking the outside. Now, what's even the question here? Anybody have any thoughts? Like, why are you even checking in the outer parts of the cellar, whether it's a complete outer part or just a section of the outer part? What are they suggesting? Thoughts? All right. Yeah. Oh, Betsy?
Somebody was eating while they're working in the wine cellar?
Great. So the Bartanura, the commentator who is sort of most helpful with this part of the Mishnah, he says you could imagine that a worker came in and was eating and was organizing while eating a sandwich, right? And actually, it doesn't even say that he dropped the crumbs of his sandwich on the floor. It says his crumbs got onto his shirt and then he continued to work and maybe it fell off in the corner or something like that. So it's kind of interesting, the chronology of this Mishnah, right? It starts off by telling us about what we should do with candlelight. And then it says, don't worry so much, right? Don't drive yourself crazy about looking for chametz in the bedroom or places where you wouldn't hide. And then it kind of takes a strict opinion, even though it takes the less strict opinion, meaning that Beit Hillel, obviously has a less strict opinion than Beit Shammai, but kind of coming back and saying, but also you should probably worry about those instances where maybe the chametz would have gotten in. And one of those instances is a worker sort of tending to the pantry or the cellar or whatever, and may have dropped a piece of crumb or a piece of something in there that you would want to go and just double check. And so that's the opening of Bidikat Hametz. Here's how you look, and here's kind of what we're looking for. Dara.
It seems interesting that in the pandemic, like the first injunction or relaxation that says you don't have to look in places where you don't normally bring hametz is really concentrating on what you or we do in our own home. The second one is about worrying about what other people might have done, like the worker or somebody organizing the pantry. And I think now in the pandemic, when we're not really letting people into our homes, it's sort of, it just brings up, well, if nobody else has been in my home except for my own family, then, can I feel more secure about this?
That's right. That's great. Yeah. So in some ways, we kind of don't have to worry about the third example because we're not necessarily worried that there are workers or other people who are moving around chametz in our house that we're unaware of, maybe like unlike the past. I think, for me, as I said, like the idea of small children and crumbs, it's like so relevant, because you think that they're not in places and then of course they are all the time. So I feel like there's like an extra sense to have to check when you have little ones. But if you have real control over your space, where you know that certain things aren't in certain places, you don't. Yeah, I agree with you, Dara, that you probably don't have to worry, especially this year. Any other thoughts or questions before we? Yeah, Iren.
How about the wind in your basement flowing into the garage or into your wine cellar or whatever? So nature bringing in crumbs. And then the counterpart is if there's been any crumbs left by human or nature, the little creatures in your basement will take care of it.
Right. Well, so that's going to be it's interesting that you say that. So you brought up two things. First of all, I guess what I'm picturing is you open your garage and a gust of wind comes in and then you have crumbs everywhere. I don't know. I'm being dramatic about it, but that's right. So then you have crumbs from the outside that weren't necessarily your fault. I think that probably, probably most of us have to check the basement if the basement is going to be a place where we're going to spend Pesach, right? Because the basement and the garage are places that for sure accumulate things that we just don't necessarily know are there. In terms of your second question about creatures and worrying about creatures bringing chametz from place to place, the Mishnah, you're thinking like a rabbi, Iren, because the Mishnah wrote a Mishnah exactly for you. So here's number 2. Ein chosheshin shema grara chuldan mibayit levayit umimakom lemakom de'im kain mechatzer lachatzer umeir leir ein ledavar sof. After conducting the search, so after you've done Bidikat Hametz, you've taken the candle, you've gone around your home, one need not be concerned that perhaps a marten, which is, I don't really know what that is, but it's like it's also like a weasel translated, like something like a small, you're all nodding like you know what it is. Okay, great, good for you. I guess I've never heard of that before, but like a small little something dragged leaven. You should not be worried that a weasel is going to drag the leaven from either house to house or from place to place. Placing leaven in a house that was already searched. So if you search your house and Iren, you let a little cat in by chance or something, you shouldn't worry that the cat is going to, I don't know if you do that anymore, but that you
do.
You do. Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought. So you shouldn't worry that the cat's going to bring you chametz from somebody else's home. And if so, one need also be concerned that perhaps leaven might be dragged from courtyard to courtyard and from city to city. In that case, there's no end to the matter, right? So it says you don't have to worry about the cat bringing it from house to house or from place to place, because if you go down that road, I love this one, right? If you go down that road, there's no end. You would have to worry that that this person came from this city or this other place, and you'd be constantly worried about having people in your home. Once you clean and you say Chag Sameach and you move on, right? Thoughts, questions? We like that. We don't like that. That worries me. Right, Iren, we like it. We like it. Roz likes it. Betsy.
Very sane.
Yeah.
Very sane, right? Which actually, I think around Pesach, and Betsy, you might have something to add to this because of being in the more traditional Orthodox communities. Sometimes we can really go down an insane road, right? Like you can really go down a quite dangerous road when we get into this cleaning. And I actually like that the Mishnah is opening up by telling us to take a breath, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Thoughts? Anything? Anybody want to add anything? Yeah, Sandra.
It's like for Shabbat, You do the work beforehand, you prepare the food, and then comes sundown, that's enough. You don't have to do any more.
That's right. Right. So you prepare as much as you can, you do your best, and then when the Shabbat starts, everything takes a rest. Yeah, and Pesach is celebrated in a similar way. Great. Okay, so now this is going to turn upside down a little bit of what we've studied in terms of the letting it rest. We lost. Oh, there's Catherine. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Bodkin or Arba'a Asar, Uv Arba'a Asar Shacharit, Uvishat Habior. Rabbi Yehuda says that one searches for leaven on the evening of the 14th of Nisan, and on the 14th in the morning, and at the time of the removal of the leaven. Okay, so there's 3 times that somebody can actually do it. And the rabbis say that is not the case. That if one did not search in the evening of the 14th, he should search on the 14th during the day. And if he did not search on the 14th, he should search during the festival, during the moed. It says betoch, let's find it. Hold on a second, because we're going to come back to it. Betoch hamoed. Any leaven that remained in his possession during the festival is classified as leaven owned by a Jew during Passover, which one is obligated to remove. And the principle is, with regard to the leaven that one leaves after the search, he should place it in a concealed location where it will most likely be left untouched so that it will not require searching after it goes missing. Okay, so ideally, right, we've done this before where we have sort of the ideal case scenario, and then we have other options that follow just in case we, either mess up or miss it or something like that. So Rabbi Yehuda says the sort of most ideal way to do this is that you're supposed to do it the night before. You should take the candlelight. There's a reason for the candle, right, that you need the light because it's dark. You should do it the night before. And if you don't get to it the night before, then you certainly should do it first thing in the morning. And then finally at the very last minute is the final hour where you can remove the leavening from your home. Now remember that we're talking about halachic hours, so we're talking about sunrise to sunset, right? In the Mishnah, we're not talking about well, it doesn't matter. We're talking about halachic hours, so they divided the hours. Essentially, we can imagine about 12 hours a day, 6 to 6 or something like that. And so 6 a.m. is really 0, and the quote 6th hour of the day we would call around noon. So then it says something that's kind of strange, which is if he did not search on the 14th, if he doesn't do it on the 14th, he should do it during the festival. And that kind of made the commentators say you're supposed to search for chametz during the Passover. That seems to not make sense. And the commentators come in to clarify, and they say, no, actually what they meant was the 6th hour of the day. So essentially the very last minute. The 6th hour of the day is when you're supposed to be coming to burn your chametz, when you're supposed to actually get rid of it. And so that is what they considered like the very last minute, if you could. So talking about essentially noon on the day before Pesach. Like afternoon, you shouldn't have any more. It should be gone. It shouldn't be in your territories anymore. Why, maybe, is a question. Why do you want to make sure that you get rid of it? So that's one opinion, right? That 6th hour situation where it's like the final moment. And then another interpretation is that actually they did mean this, that actually they did mean that if you searched for it during the moed, that you should make sure to get rid of it. And why? Because they have these 2 categories, one of which is sort of Pesach Hametz, which is something if you were to, I don't know, you open your cabinet and there's like an Entenmann's donut or something like that. And you're like, oops, I forgot to throw that away. That is no longer to be eaten afterwards, right? Like this is something that was found in your home during Pesach, and now it's asur, it's forbidden, and you shouldn't have that at the end, right? Like you may have heard that some people won't break Pesach with pizza that was made during the Chag, right? So like on a Friday, so say the Pesach ends sundown on Friday, okay? And you want to break with pizza, well, you know that pizza is probably been made during Pesach, and so you wouldn't actually break with something like that. It's complicated though, because most things that we're going to try to break Pesach with have been made during Pesach, depending on the hour, depending on the time of week. But it's all to say that the things that you find during the week, you shouldn't then eat them later. You should throw them away. They should be everything should be put away and out of sight, right? But actually we go with the Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha now, today, goes with Rabbi Yehuda, who says that you should essentially do it as early as you can, so the evening or the morning or by the 6th hour. And the halacha says that we should not be going out of our way searching during the moed, even if you forgot. That you should sort of let it go and hope that you don't come across anything. And if you do come across something, you throw it away or you put it in a place that you're not gonna benefit from it, that you're not gonna eat it after the holiday. Thoughts? Yeah, Iren.
Can you reuse some of the chametz after the holiday?
So like what?
Let's say you have flour that you've put aside.
Can I make a comment, Amanda?
Sure.
So there's this custom, Elaine, where some people, you'll sign a paper to Rabbi Ann or Amanda, and you pay a small nominal donation, and they're acting as your agents to sell it to someone who's not Jewish, who owns it during Passover, and then the rabbis buy it back the night that Passover ends, and then it's yours again and you can use it again. So you
Right.
don't have-
Oh, I see. So that permits you to reuse it.
Right, but you didn't own it during Passover on this
Yeah.
technical formulation.
So
That's right. So
you cannot put it just at your neighbor.
You can, but you actually want to give them $1 or something. You sell
I
it.
see.
right.
First year we kept kosher. The first year we did this strictly, we literally took it across the street to our friend's garage. We never did that again. That was like just going beyond. So we have a lot of cabinets that get taped off, and we do a lot of upstairs, downstairs moving, but yeah, that I feel like the technical selling it through the rabbi works. That's what the rabbis came up with. So people didn't have to throw out stuff, I think.
That's right. And Iren, I think part of what you may have been asking also is like, you can use flour during the, right? Because flour, and we're going to see that in another Mishnah, flour, as long as it doesn't rise, right, is okay, right?
Oh.
So like if you
No.
use, Yeah, go
You
ahead.
can't use the flour that you've been sticking your hand into making challah. You need to use cake
but
meal
if you-
flour.
for sure,
But it
for
came
sure.
from
No. But I thought that what I heard was the question was, if you have something in your home over Pesach, can you then continue to use it after Pesach, right? Isn't that what you were asking?
Yeah.
Like if you open a new jar of peanut butter, for example, peanut butter is a
Yes.
bad example, or it's whatever. If you open a new jar of jam, right, for specifically for Pesach, then at the end of Pesach, what happens to that jam? That's the question. You're okay.
No,
just use
it was more.
It was more the other one.
Chametz, the chametz.
got
Can
it.
you reuse them after? But it goes with your question, just the same
Yeah.
way.
Right, that's right. So yeah, so the idea is that things can come back into your possession. Yeah. Marty.
So it made me think too, that's what we do. We do the contract and so on with you.
Right.
And the other thing is that if you find something, you can give it to someone to use so that if it's going to spoil, then you're not wasting any.
Right,
For
right.
someone that doesn't celebrate Pesach.
Right. Yeah. You can always give it away. You can give it away to somebody who would benefit from it, who's not Jewish, right? Who'd be able to use it. And maybe that's like, if it's going to spoil anyway, maybe that's kind of the highest, maybe that's the ideal, right? Is to give it to someone who can actually get use out of it. I think this, and what I think Iren was talking about were things that could be put away, and could be saved for 7 or 8 days and be able to come back to it. The flour, and we're going to see this in another Mishnah, the flour and grains and such that are able to be used as long as they don't rise. So like things like flour is a great example. Wheat flour, you actually make your matzah out of wheat flour, right? So wheat flour alone is okay, but not if it's risen past a certain amount, right? Like 18 minutes or something like that. There's a time of rising that somebody who bakes knows better than I do. And so to Betsy's point, yes, even though the flour is allowed, you wouldn't want to use a flour that you've been taking your hands in and out of for the past 6 months to make challah. You'd probably want to start with something that was new. And then that's kind of dependent on how strict you get in your home. Like, are you going to open a new jar of peanut butter, right? I keep saying a jar of peanut butter because it's just the first thing that comes to my mind. Some people don't eat peanut butter even on Pesach. But the question is, and it kind of goes back to the very first one, how do you think you regularly take the peanut butter out of the jar? Are you going from the peanut butter to the bread back into the peanut butter, right? Because then you might worry that the crumbs from the bread got back in your peanut butter. If you sort of take one scoop and then you spread it and you move on, it's maybe a different story, and you don't have to worry about the sort of contamination factor of reaching in and out of certain things. And again, it's like how strict you are in your home, and you kind of know your own your own way in your own kitchen and your own food. So you kind of make that decision on your own. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Sandra.
Well, I didn't think that was permissible. I thought you had to have everything new and fresh for Pesach.
So
If you use peanut butter, you have to get a new container.
yes, definitely that the strict opinion says yes. Last year, when we entered into the pandemic and we were talking about food scarcities, there was conversation around things that were already opened and how to deal with them. So peanut butter is probably a bad example, because you could store peanut butter for 7 or 8 days. You could put it away and you probably wouldn't worry that it would spoil when you got back, right? But there are things like, I don't know, milk, for example, that was open, that you don't have to worry about was contaminated in any kind of way, and you could continue to use it. So that's actually kind of a new custom and new, new, I don't know, way of thinking about it from last year. And it's kind of interesting to think about, like, the things that you take in and out. I'm not saying one opinion is better than the other. I mean, we have a long history of, yes, like you said, Sandra, throwing out things that are open, and being very sort of meticulous about the cleaning. And only in the past year, when we've been talking about, again, like food scarcities and actually being able to get the things that you need, especially last year, I remember it was like trying to get things that were hechshered. I mean, forget it, right? It was hard enough to get an Instacart order from Safeway, let alone getting real Pesach ingredients for the holiday that had a hechsher on them. So there were some leniencies that were taken by the movement that allow you to do things in what they felt was like a safe way. The peanut butter is a funny one, because I don't think anybody really, I think most people have to worry about that, but I don't know why we're stuck on that anyway. Irene.
I was thinking back of what Marty said, and it's actually, I often feel like when I give away things at Pesach, it's a little bit like, when you have a field and you grow things and you always have to keep a part for the widow and
Tithing,
yeah, and the poor. It's almost like you get rid of things that you normally don't get rid of, but it's like a generosity part.
Yeah, there's generosity and intention behind it, and there's also, I think, an element of spring cleaning. Like, I think that some people look forward to this time because they really pull everything out of their cabinet. It's like once a year thing. You pull everything out of your cabinet. You pull everything out of the deepest parts of your freezer, right? And you see what's there, and you can throw things away, or you can give them to people who might need it if it's something that's still, good and usable. And so some of the sort of like strict behavior around this, or what might seem to be like overdoing it for some people, is really just an element of the season, right? And people kind of wanting to go through their cabinets and really pull things out, and organize. I love doing that. I think it's like healthy to do it once a year. Yeah, Betsy.
Well, just, you just gave the example for people who don't really do this too much and who might hear you just now. You gave the example of food in your freezer. Yeah, it's a good time to take stock. and find that stuff that you've had since last year at Pesach, but you didn't use for Pesach, whatever. It's getting old to think, oh, I could try to use this before Pesach or whatever, but you can also keep it. There's nothing wrong with it being in your freezer. So it's not even that you have to give it away, and you certainly don't have to throw it out. You just use it when you can, and you just remember that it's there. It's the issues of the things that are like those things that could be the leaven things, or the things that are like corn and flour and things that are, depending on how people observe certain rules, that, it's like certain things you really don't want around you. And other things, it kind of doesn't matter. We tape over the door of our fridge with all our condiments. We never can get through all our condiments. We just
Sure.
cover it with a piece of paper, and it's like like you said, it's out of sight, out of mind. But I only have one fridge, so that's what I have to do. If I had two fridges like I did a long time ago, I actually did schlep things downstairs and had the fridge upstairs just was Pesach. But it's like, that's a level of neurotics that I think people don't really have to do. You just need to know what you don't want to eat. You don't need to know what you don't want to work with, and you don't want to have it out on the counter.
That's right.
It's like, it's good enough.
And I think that there's also like around alcohol also, people have like alcohol cabinets, right? That you can't possibly get through all of those. You shouldn't try to get through all of those bottles before Pesach, right? That would be a dangerous habit. And like I have a friend who says like the scotch is like the thing that for me needs to be gone during Pesach, but the bourbons and this and that, those things get taped up and they get put away. But it's like his ritual to like get through the scotch, right? And make sure, because that's sort of the pre-Pesach thing. Knowing also, though, that he could put it away and sort of designate it for after. Oh, I said scotch. Here comes Todd. Yeah.
It's not my ritual. I've got a year's worth of scotch. I just keep it in cartons down in my garage.
Right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Better not to start drinking through it, especially now with only 3 weeks to go. We should have started this a few weeks ago if you wanted to really get a move on. Yeah, Marty.
This is a very aside, but we just did go through our freezer, and we had things from the start of the pandemic that are, you only keep certain things for so long. But I just wanted to say, I don't know what's in the city we're in, but they have these 2 residential cleanups, and you can do 14 extra bags for no cost. So if you guys have that in the city and you're doing your spring cleaning or your Pesach cleaning, see what week you have. I know that's
right.
Crazy, but
where does it go? Does it go to compost?
It takes 14 extra bags of compost, recyclable, and garbage. You decide whatever. So,
Irene.
From a health point of view, maybe also this was meant to get rid of spoiled things that you don't even know are spoiled after a certain lifetime.
Yeah, possible, right? Yeah, certainly we've all had those moments where you start to clean out the fridge and you see, oops, 2017, right? Oops. And that's certainly one that you want to get rid of. That's what I like about Pesach. I mean, that's what I like to do. I like to pull everything out and sort of figure out what's there and what frozen things have iced over and are time to go and things like that. So definitely there's a health aspect. I don't think that's necessarily what they were going for in the Mishnah, but definitely now we can think about it from a health perspective. All right, let's look at one more at least before we go. This is similar to the one above, right? About making sure what time is it actually removed. So Rabbi Meir Omer ochlim kol chamesh v'sorfin bitchilat shesh. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ochlim kol arba v'tolin kol chamesh v'sorfin bitchilat shesh. The Tanaim disagreed, the rabbis disagreed regarding until what time leavening may be eaten and at what time it must be removed on Pesach Eve. Rabbi Meir says one may eat the leaven the entire 5th hour of the 14th of Nisan. So this is, again, these halachic hours. So the 5th hour is probably, to us, around 11 a.m. And the 6th hour is going to be the one that you need to stop. So just for a reference. And one must burn it immediately afterward at the beginning of the 6th hour. So that's more or less what we observe now. Rabbi Yehuda says one may eat the entire 4th hour and one places it in abeyance or sort of like takes it off of temporary disuse for the entire 5th hour and one burns it at the beginning of the 6th hour. So again, there's kind of these two opinions of sort of making sure, we call it putting a fencer on the Torah, right? Making sure that we don't mess up particularly because in those times they didn't have clocks to tell them what if it was the 4th or the 5th or the 6th hour. And one of the commentators says if it was a cloudy day and you weren't able to watch the sun or you didn't know exactly what time it was, that's what Rabbi Yehuda is sort of saying here, which is that you want to be extra strict about it and you want to eat it in the 4th hour, which is around, what did I say, around 10 a.m. And then you want to sort of lay it low. In other words, don't touch it, don't eat it, don't do anything with it at around 11. And by noon, you're going to burn. This year, by the way, you can go to the synagogue, kind of like signups like we've been having in these past few events. We don't expect hundreds of people like we did for other things, but if you're interested in sort of doing a symbolic burning of your chametz, we'll be there at 11:30, between 11:30 and noon on Friday. We'll talk about that in a second. So that you can go and burn your chametz if you want. Betsy.
For the people who do this, but because Shabbat, evening of Shabbat, Saturday night, Motzei Shabbat
That's
is
right.
when Pesach starts. Everything is unusually different this year. So normally you would want to be cleaning on Friday night, doing Bidikat Hametz on Friday night for when Pesach starts, but you're doing it on Thursday night anyway, and you're still eating it at Shabbos. You eat it at Shabbos, you make hamotzi and you eat it for dinner, and you eat it if you make a Shabbos day meal, you still have a challah roll. Some people will stand outside on their front porch and not like, it's like, again, it's like you don't have to be nuts. You try to clean up the crumbs from that, but you've already disowned it technically.
Right.
But because it's Shabbos trumps the other stuff. So
yeah, so this year's
it's very weird this year.
Right. So Betsy's bringing up that this year the Seder is on Saturday night. And so of course you wouldn't be taking a light on Friday evening to go and search your you wouldn't take a light to go and search your Bidikat Hametz on Friday night. You would do it on Thursday night in preparation for Shabbat and then Pesach, which is Saturday night. But also there's the sort of elevating of Shabbat and the importance of Shabbat and wanting to have a challah roll potentially. And so Betsy's saying you can bring it in, but you have to sort of be careful with it. Same thing with like all the food that we're going to be, right? Like we have, we're ordering from Oakland Kosher. Everything's being delivered on Friday. It would have typically been delivered on the actual day on Saturday, but we're having to move everything up because of Pesach. It's very complicated. But yeah, I think that Todd wrote in the chat, that's what egg matzah is for, right? That you can still do your hamotzi and not worry. It is complicated if you're feeling, stressed about sort of bringing in chametz and what are you going to have for Shabbat dinner and Shabbat lunch and things like that when you've already cleaned your home. Certainly in an industrial kitchen, like at Beth Sholom, we're going to clean our kitchen because we're going to be storing the food that's comes from Oakland Kosher, may have to go in our fridge or something like that. We wouldn't bring any chametz into a kitchen that was industrial, but in your own homes, you have to sort of figure out what works for you. All right, let's, any other thoughts? So these are four Mishnayot from the very first chapter of the Mishnah. And then I just have two sort of smaller ones about some of the grains, which I brought just in case we had extra time, and we do. So let's check them out. So here are the types of grains which a person can fulfill one's obligation to eat matzah. So it's an obligation. You're obligated to eat matzah on the first night of Passover. And here are some of the grains. Elu devarim she'adam yotzei vahem yedei chovato bepesach. Chitin, wheat, bisorin, spelt, barley, bekusmin, uv shifon, uv shibolet shual. So these are the grains that you can use to essentially make matzah. You can make it with wheat, barley, spelt, rye, and oats. And v'yotzin bidmai uv'ma'aser rishon shenitla truma u'ma'aser sheni v'hekdesh. So this next part is we're going to kind of go through it very quickly because it's a little bit complicated. But essentially, they're talking about the different how you tithed and whether you have to worry about the certain tithings having been taken out. We talked about this in brachot a little bit, right? When the first tithe versus the second tithe and whether it was for the priests, etc. So I'll just read through it very quickly to get to the punchline, which is what we want to get to. One fulfills one's obligation by not only matzah made from properly tithed grains, but with matzah made from doubtfully tithed produce. So you don't actually have to worry, is it whether it's tithed or not? You can make the matzah from those products whether you're sure or not. I think we talked about this a little bit. If you're concerned that it didn't actually have the right amount of tithing out of it, you don't have to worry. And priests may eat matzah prepared from challah, the portion of the dough that is given to the priest, or with truma, as priests are permitted to eat these portions. However, this is the punchline. Not yet. One may not fulfill one's obligation to eat matzah made with untithed produce, nor with matzah made from the first tithe, which is truma, etc., etc. Now, here we go. With regard to one who prepared loaves of matzah that are brought with a thanks offering. So there was a special offering called the todah, or the wafers brought by a nazir. The sages drew the following distinctions. If one prepared it for himself, then he does not fulfill his obligation to eat matzah with it. So, and however, if he prepared them to sell in the market to those who require them, one fulfills. So if he's preparing it specifically for the sake of it being matzah, right? If he's preparing it for other people to have it or to be used for Pesach, then then that person can use that as their obligation, as their matzah. But if you're just kind of making it in your house for, using up old things or whatever, if it's not intended to actually be the matzah, then you're not supposed to use it for that. So first, it kind of gives us a layout of the grains, which I don't know if anybody found that interesting, but good to know, right? That certain grains, which you wouldn't have a bowl of oatmeal necessarily because the oats would rise in a way that wouldn't work, but you could actually make oat matzah, for example, if you timed it correctly. And then later on to let us know that you have to, in order to make the matzah kosher for Pesach, it has to be with the intention of Passover. The thing that comes to mind for me is those, maybe you've seen the Tam Tams. Have you seen those crackers, Tam Tams? And many of those Tam Tams boxes, watch out, will say not kosher for Passover. And you always wonder, like, why is that? And perhaps there's an ingredient, or perhaps there's a reason. Maybe it was made, at a time when it wasn't intended for Pesach, and so that's why it got rejected. I'm not sure. Maybe somebody here knows. Betsy.
Well, it's the same thing. Lots of times grocery stores have matzah all year long, but people will use it and the store doesn't know the difference. And they'll put that out with the Pesach stuff, but it says, not for Passover use, because Pesach matzah is made in a very specific way, in a very timed way. And maybe the rest of the time it's just kind of, okay, we're baking flat bread, whatever. The other thing about all those grains that, people, especially gluten-free issue people, it's lucky that you can actually store buy spelt and oat and stuff that is made for Pesach matzah, which is, I don't know that it was always around, but it's commercially available now, because I know people who just really, don't want to even take like a tiniest bite of a regular flour matzah.
That's right. And then the commentator tells us, so you have all these grains. You have wheat, barley, spelt, rye, oats. Has anybody ever made matzah out of anything other than flour? Anybody ever done this before? Okay. No, nobody. So you have these grains that you're able to make matzah out of. And then the commentary says, but no, you can't make it out of rice or out of millet. Some people do eat rice, right? Sephardi have a custom of eating rice, and some people have adopted that. And the reason for that is because apparently something like rice or millet, I don't really know what millet is. I guess it's another rice-like grain.
Corn. It's corn.
Oh, it's like corn. Okay, great. So it will, over time, it would decay. It wouldn't rise. It would decay, apparently. That's what the commentator says. So very specific, which is interesting that in the Mishnah, because of, the Sephardi custom that you're able to eat rice and corn, that those are the two that the commentators name as being the ones that you specifically should not use for matzah. All right. Yeah.
Do you think there was rice in Persia, or was that a thing that grew in Persia or in the ancient Middle East?
I mean,
certainly it was the everything flourished in the grains, but I always think of it as, more tropical. You need a lot of rain. Well, it's like, was it even on the menu then?
It feels like knowing some Persian Jews, it feels like it has to have been. It has to have gone back that far, but I don't actually know, Betsy. Catherine, did you have a thought?
Oh, no, it's just, it's rice is kind of a pillar of their Persian cuisine.
I know,
so-
that's what I'm,
Hmm.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It would be hard to imagine that you could take that out. All right, let's do one more quickly. So now we're talking about the maror, okay? Let's see. Yeah. So these are the things that can fulfill your obligation to bitterness, essentially, right? To maror. One can fulfill with chazeret, which we've heard of is kind of like a piece of lettuce or like a green something. With tamcha, whatever that is, with harchavina, whatever that is. There are these different kind of different grains and different kinds of vegetable, and with endimes and with maror. The maror specifically, when it says maror here, it's of course they're like answering the question with the question, or answering the, you know what I mean, when you say, well, you can fulfill your maror with the maror, is some sort of a coriander. That's what how they explained it in the commentaries, which is like the most sort of bitter the most bitter green that you can find. One fulfills one's obligation with them whenever they are fresh and whenever they are dry. So they have to be either raw or sort of dried out. They can't be cooked. However, one does not fill the obligation if they are pickled in water or in vinegar, nor if they are overboiled. Overboiled is like almost like soupy, right? Like if you were to put like greens into soup and it would become super wilted and would fill up with liquid. Nor if they are boiled. Oh, sorry. The Mishnah adds, and all of these different types of vegetables join together to the measure of an olive bulk. So you should have a kazait. We've heard that term before, right? An olive's worth. So something like about this big. And it's not necessary to eat this amount from one specific type of vegetable. So you could take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but as long as you get the full olive's worth, you're covered. And one fulfills his obligation by eating their stalk. So you can eat the stalk of it. You don't necessarily have to eat the leaf. And one fulfills the obligation when doubtfully tithe produce. This is kind of from before, that you don't have to worry about whether it is has actually been redeemed. You know, that it was tithed in the correct way. So that's a little bit about maror, which is kind of interesting. I don't know what you use for maror, but those are some examples of things that you can, some that you can. On your Seder plate, sometimes there's a piece for chazeret and separately maror. And sometimes it's confusing which one do I put where, and essentially you can put either in either spot. Betsy.
My guess is most European-based families used horseradish because those greens weren't growing yet in Pesach time in Europe. So you couldn't exactly, like the whole thing of dipping parsley. It's like, well, maybe you got parsley coming up in March in Russia, but maybe not. So I'm thinking that's where we got horseradish from. And it fits that description of dry.
Maybe, right. Or maybe the horseradish came into effect when we started eating gefilte fish, because it feels necessary to drown out the gefilte fish with the horseradish. Anybody else?
I can tell you love gefilte fish.
I don't mind it. I don't think I'd eat it raw, like plain though. Yeah, Irene.
Belgian endives are very common in Europe, and
endives are useful.
Those were grown for a while, but.
Well.
Did you know all of those? So like Tom Cherville or Field Eringo, have you heard of those before?
Is Cherville like watercress?
Yes.
What is it?
Like watercress.
No. I'm sorry. Cherville is not like watercress. Cherville is a very fine, delicate, very fragrant green leaf, while watercress is kind of a spicy, robust lettuce-like, small lettuce-like.
There we go. Well, I know that you can, there's a website that that sort of goes into all of these different ones. If you're interested, it's kind of can take you down a rabbit hole. Anyway, so this was Pesach week number 1. I hope that it kind of gave you something to think about. I think the big takeaway for me, and what I want to sort of bring us, especially in this time that we're continuing to be in pandemic world a little bit, is that everybody should do their best, right? Everybody should do their best to make their home the Pesach that they can. And of course, if you have questions, Rabbi Ain and I are here to answer some of those. And there also have been a lot of papers, even since last year, written about how to go about Pesach in these kind of uncertain times. So thank you for learning this morning. Todd, did you want to say something?
I was going to say the great thing about Pesach is that the customs, each family has their own customs. And in terms of adapting from the past and adopting from others in the community, it's always really amazing to see how people observe Pesach.
That's right. Has anybody ever been to a Sephardi Seder where they actually hit each other with the green onions? Yeah, there you go. That's a perfect example. Yeah.
I was just saying, I've been to a Moroccan where they wave the Seder plate over your head 7
Oh,
times.
there you go. Right. You'll see all kinds of.
Also,
Yeah.
yeah.
I have a question, and that is, how are you feeling, Rabbi